Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. This is the account with the news summary for day 382 of the war in Ukraine. The quiet days continue, and I have only the usual segments to report. The situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. First up, the flashpoints along the front. Before we start the actual flashpoints, I wanted to note something. In the past days, there has been a lot of misinformation reported on the front lines from both sides. Remember that this war is not only fought on the ground, but also in the information space. Certain news can make or break the morale of the units on the ground. What I want to point out, though, is that lately we have seen a huge increase of very positive pro-Russian reports from the front, especially by high-ranking officials. Allegedly, Russia is practically advancing unimpeded while destroying Ukrainian defenses left and right. Throughout the war, I have made the experience that the louder Russia touts alleged victories, the worse the situation is looking for them. Just keep in mind that if things would really be going as they claim, Ukraine would have lost already. Denis Pushilin, for example, reported Bakhmut is close to liberation at the beginning of January, and other sources claimed in February that Bakhmut would fall in the next 48 hours. Also, something to take note of. As temperatures are rising above freezing, the mud season is starting in the Donbas. It is doubtful we will see any major mechanized advances across open fields. Temperatures will reportedly be around 5 to 10 degrees Celsius or 41 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, with a mix of rainy days and sunny days over the next weeks. Here the weather reports for Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Kremina. It was claimed today that Ukraine has made gains around Chervonopopivka north of Kremina. Bakhmut. The situation has not changed significantly. Especially in the northwest, the situation remains critical for Ukraine, although Russia was not able to make any noteworthy advances. Orikhovo-Vasiliivka was reported under Russian control by the Institute for the Study of War, however, no other source reported about this. Prigozhin said today that Bakhmut is turning difficult for Russia as Ukraine keeps sending in reserves. He went on to say that Wagner, however, will continue to move forward. Avdiivka. Russia and its proxies are claiming that Krasnohorivka is under their full control, which is quite frankly doubtful as no evidence has been provided. The most likely situation is that Russia managed to gain a foothold in the settlement and it is now contested. This is also corroborated by several trustworthy sources on both sides. We have to see how the situation develops over the next couple of days. Please remember that any claims made by Denis Pushilin and his administration are to be taken with a huge pinch of salt. Vuhledar. Russian forces have tried to regain lost positions in the dachas south of Vuhledar. Heavy fighting is reported in the area and Russia has increasingly used its air force. To start the news segment, a look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. The Kyiv City Military Administration reported that it took 3 days to fully restore heating, water and electricity in the aftermath of the Kinzhal strike on the capital. President Zelensky reported in his evening address last night that the city of Kharkiv was hit by over 40 missiles since the beginning of the year. The Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Ihor Klimenko, stated that Ukraine is working on a database of war criminals, which will be shared with other countries, and it will soon be ready. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba, said that he does not expect the supply of Western fighter jets to Ukraine in the near future. Kuleba said this in an interview with a German-Bild newspaper. President Volodymyr Zelensky has awarded Oleksandr Matsievskyi, the Ukrainian soldier executed by Russians after saying glory to Ukraine, with the title Hero of Ukraine. This comes after the Security Service of Ukraine has established that Oleksandr Matsievskyi, A sniper of the 163rd Battalion of the 119th Territorial Defense Brigade of Chernihiv Oblast was indeed the Ukrainian soldier executed. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. According to Natalia Humenyuk, spokeswoman for the Security and Defense Forces of Ukraine's South Operational Command, Russian forces could set up additional firing points on the Kinburn Spit. The armed forces of Ukraine are monitoring the situation. Petro Andriuschenko, the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, reported about explosions in the Mariupol area in the direction of the village of Satana. He also reported that Russian forces scrambled their aircraft after the explosions. Andriuschenko also reported that a residential neighbourhood in Mariupol has turned into a desert. Members of the Atesh underground resistance movement have blown up a section of the railway between the settlements of Avdiivka and Radensk in occupied Kherson Oblast. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Russia has currently only 6 warships on active combat duty in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. None of these are missile carriers. According to Serhiy Nayev, commander of the Joint Forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, chances of a renewed invasion from the territory of Belarus are currently low. However, Ukraine has noted an increase in accommodations for additional forces at the training grounds. Relatives of mobilized soldiers from the Moscow Oblast recorded a video appeal to Russian President Vladimir Putin and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, in which they asked for the return of their sons and husbands from the assault units. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. 14 armored ambulances produced by the British company Venari were sent to Ukraine from Luxembourg, the Embassy of Ukraine in Belgium reported. Russian intelligence agencies are planning to destabilize the situation in Moldova through riots organized by Shor, a pro-Russian party, the head of Moldova's national police stated. The former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania has stated that the Russian Federation tries to steal Ukraine's historical identity all the time and that it's not a superpower, it's a super problem. Switzerland has decided to dismantle 60 Rapier anti-aircraft missile defense systems. The decision has caused backlash nationally and internationally as these systems could be donated to Ukraine instead. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting as usual with the UK Ministry of Defense. As Russia continues to suffer extremely heavy casualties, the impact varies dramatically across Russia's regions. In proportion to the size of their population, the richest cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg have been left relatively unscathed. This is especially true for the families of the country's elite. On February 21, 2023, Russian senior officials were photographed making up the front 2 rows of the audience of President Putin's State of the Nation speech. None of these are known to have children serving in the military. In many of the eastern regions, deaths are likely running as a percentage of population at a rate of 30 to 40 times higher than in Moscow. In many places, ethnic minorities take the biggest hit. In Astrakhan, some 75% of casualties come from the minority Kazakh and Tatar populations. As the Russian Ministry of Defense seeks to address its continued deficit of combat personnel, insulating the better off and more influential elements of Russian society will highly likely remain a major consideration. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the Institute, Russian forces did not make any advances in Bakhmut on March 11th. The eastern city of Bakhmut has been Russia's main target for over 7 months. Wagner Group fighters are likely becoming increasingly pinned in urban areas, such as the Azom industrial facility, and are therefore finding it difficult to make significant advances. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said on March 11th that there is infighting in the Kremlin's inner circle and that the Kremlin has effectively ceded control over the country's information space. Speaking at a forum on the practical and technological aspects of information and cognitive warfare in modern realities in Moscow, Zakharova mentioned that despite fighting among unspecified Kremlin elites, the Kremlin cannot replicate the Stalinist approach of establishing a modern equivalent to the Soviet Information Bureau. The researcher said Zakharova's statement is noteworthy and supports several assessments about the deteriorating Kremlin regime and information space control dynamics. It is unclear why Zakharova, a seasoned senior spokesperson, would have openly acknowledged these problems in a public setting. The analysts also evaluated Yevgeny Prigozhin's statement that he would transform the Wagner Group into a hardline ideological elite parallel military organization and will start a new wave of recruitment after the Battle of Bakhmut. The Wagner Group has recently been expanding recruitment centers throughout Russia, including centers and programs focused on recruiting youth. Prigozhin may be attempting to restructure the Wagner Group into a hardline ideological elite parallel military organization to carve out a specialized role among Russian forces in Ukraine, as its former role in solely securing tactical gains dissipated with the Wagner Group's likely culmination around Bakhmut. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. To achieve its goals, the enemy does not count on its own losses. The main efforts are focused on conducting offensive actions in the Liman, Bakhmut, and Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shakhtarsk directions. The Russian Federation continues to use terror tactics, carries out indiscriminate shelling of populated areas, thereby grossly violating the norms of international humanitarian law. In the Kupiansk and Liman directions, the enemy is making attempts to break through the defense of our troops. The enemy led unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of Dvorichna, Dibrova, and Zebriansk forest. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy does not stop trying to capture the city of Bakhmut. Our defenders repelled enemy attacks in the areas of Minkivka and Orihovo-Vasilivka settlements. In the Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shakhtarsk directions, the enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of Krasnohorivka, Kamyanka, Severne, Nevelske, Marinka, Pobjeda, and Voleda settlements of the Donetsk Oblast. The enemy is defending in the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions. In some settlements of the temporarily occupied Kherson Oblast, the Russian occupiers commit looting. The Russian invaders are trying to sell looted gadgets and household appliances to civilians, but already in other settlements. The enemy continues to suffer losses. On March 11th, the arrival of about 30 bodies of dead occupiers to the local neighbourhood morgue was noted. At the same time, the Russian military leadership is taking measures to restore manpower losses. Thus, on March 10th, reinforcements from the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous District arrived in Yalta in the Donetsk Oblast. The low motivation and reluctance of the enemy's personnel to participate in hostilities is noted. And with that, another report is finished. I have provided all the links to the articles I mentioned in the description as usual. Please check them out if you are interested in more details. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. I hope you will join me again tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.